Hello, and welcome to another edition of Reckless Spending with the 1911 Syndicate. Now, we all know that the economy is a little bit tight these days. You may find yourself searching for which gas station has the lowest price at the pump. You might be electing to get the store brand of Captain Crunch instead of the real deal. No doubt your wife is telling you you need to stop watching the 1911 Syndicate. But an HK P7 is really cool. You may have fantasized, like I have, about throwing a red dot on one and maybe throwing some serrations up here, maybe getting crazy and suppressing one. And none of that sounds cheap, which would mean you'd have to give me some valid reasons why I need it. Honey, our kids are gonna wind up a bunch of sissy freaking college nerds, or we could use their tuition money, get them a P7 and make them a man. Honey, ramen is cool, so let's start a trend. We'll eat it for a year, put it on TikTok, we'll start a trend, and we could use the leftover food budget to get a P7. Woman, do you even know what a gas retarded delay system is? Okay, everyone, welcome to the show. A lot to cover today. A topic that I've been pretty fascinated by for about a year now that we've been working on this video. So we're going to be looking at the P7 Pro project, which is basically a sort of modernized and, basically a modernized and sort of bringing the P7 back to life via America. We will get all into it. We'll talk a little bit about what an actual P7 is for those of you that are maybe just less familiar with HK pistols. We'll spend the majority of the time talking about the actual P7 Pro. Now, I will tell you this, I don't like, and I basically always deny whenever a company's like, hey, we'll fly out and be in the video with you. I'm like, let's not do that, because it really puts off this perception of like, hey, I was paid to make this video and it's just kind of like this bought and paid for shill job. And I don't like that. I tell you that just to let you know, this is a rare case of Brett, who'll be joining us in the video. I invited Brett to be here. I just thought, hey, look, this is kind of a fascinating story, and I think there's a few layers to it that he will do a better job of discussing than I can. So just know that, like, he's here because I said, hey, I'd love you to jump on a plane and come on out. He also made me the gun for the video. B&T helped me out with the suppressor and the barrel, and ChurchCon with the optic and everything. So sort of the powers that be came together to help me get all this gun, set up and put together. Just fair that you guys know that, but just understand that's the nature of the deal here. Sponsor of today's video would be Ciguera Gear. If you're an assassin and you carry this, which I couldn't fault you for that. I think this could be a perfectly valid assassin pistol. You're probably gonna want a belt. You can't just like put this in a pocket. It's not a pocket gun. So if you're gonna have an assassin belt, A light inner Velcro belt would be my recommendation. That's what I carry. Not an assassin, real estate agent slash D-list YouTuber, but that's what I would recommend. On the Ciguera site there, you'll also find the Emissary belt if you want something a little bit more rigid, sort of can do a little bit of everything, range, EDC, all of that. They got the Battle Wagon if you want to go full battle belt. Great system. They've got some cool ways that you do all the attachments for your mag pouches and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, check that out. There's a code you guys can plug in, save 10%. That would be 1911 Syndicate. Really appreciate the support from them. Great company, been with us for a while. I think a lot of you guys have supported them, got their gear. And yeah, with that said, let's talk a little bit about the history of the P7. Okay, everyone, before we get too far down the rabbit hole of P7 Pro and sort of the modernization of the platform, I don't want to assume that everyone knows what a P7 is and sort of the basic history of it. So let's just take you on a brief little tour of what the heck a P7 is. So obviously it's a factory HK gun. Let's start with the 101 stuff. So we've also done more in-depth looks on the P7. Recently we had a video with James in the Gray Room. You guys can check all that out and learn about all the cool movies and all that kind of stuff. But basically, hey, 1970s, Germany is looking for a new service pistol for its police force. And instead of submitting their existing P9S, which is what HK would have submitted at that time, they said, let's just build you a new gun from the ground up. That's where the P7 came from. So first thing, it was chambered in 9mm. For the time, that was actually semi-uncommon because most of the things were in smaller, like 32, 380, things like that. So this was a bit more robust. So first thing, extremely low bore access on a P8. For those of you that never messed with these, they actually do have a slide lock. It is very subtle, and it is over here. That'll be a fun party trick you guys can pull out. So you'll see there in terms of reciprocating mass, very little, and in terms of where your hand is versus where the bore is, aka bore access, very, very low. So this is basically low bore access before it was really a thing. It's also a fixed barrel design. So P7s are known to be incredibly accurate guns, and they are very easy to be accurate with because they have a very crisp trigger. I'll show you how that works in just a moment. They function, it's basically a piston gun, so it operates on a gas retarded delay system. I did not misspeak. That is correct, a gas retarded delay system. It is also the first pistol to have 3-dot sights. If you look on the back of a P7, assuming it has, factory sights on it, you'll notice 3 dots. Cool, that's common these days. At that time, it was not. But if we look at the hallmark feature of what makes a P7, it is this funky little thing that's happening here. It is a squeeze cocker. So it's a multi-function lever or lever. Lever or lever, you guys can debate that down in the comments. But basically what it's doing is P7 was designed under the premise of the officer or the person that can get their gun into the fight and get the first rounds off as fast as possible. They have the highest likelihood of winning that gunfight. Also built on 8-round mags because all the studies at that time showed that, hey, you don't really go through more than 8 rounds in your typical gunfight. Can it happen? Yes, but is it common? Not really. So basically 8-round mags. There's an M13 variant that runs on a double stack M13 or 13-round mag. But basically the squeeze cocker was designed so that the officer can just, without it squeezed or squozed, squoze? I don't know. Basically, without the squeeze cocker depressed, the trigger is dead. All the safety mechanisms are in this. One of the abilities that gives you that wasn't that common back then is carrying with a round in the chamber. A lot of the protocol back then was like, basically draw the gun and you got to actually chamber a round. Because with the squeeze cocker, with all the safety mechanisms, if that is not squozed, I'm gonna hit you guys with that, have fun there, then you cannot actually depress the trigger. So all the officer has to do, he has a hot gun, we'll make the gun hot. All he has to do is basically grip the gun, and you'll see the little striker assembly come out of the back there, and that's what enables the gun to fire. So all the officer had to do is do everything he's naturally gonna do, which is draw the gun, squeeze the gun on the way out, and what this also does, because you're basically pre-cocking the striker, I guess that's kind of the maybe non-technical version of how I'll put it, you get an extremely crisp trigger pull. It's a striker fire gun, but all that bullshit and mush and heaviness is gone because you took it out when you squozed the gun. And like I said, incredibly easy gun to be accurate with. When your gun runs dry, the other thing the multi-lever does, insert the mag, grip the gun, and that's what gets your gun back in the fight. So it is an incredibly simple, it is a very, very user-intuitive gun. There's been other variants over the years. We won't get into that now. I just wanted to give you the basic rundown on what a P7 is. Okay, everyone, and welcome. We are here with Brett from P7 Pro. How freaking nervous are you? Are you doing okay?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, you're doing okay. Okay, we'll grab a drink afterwards, and we'll send it. So, guys, we've got to let the story unfold. A little bit of a slow burn today, so just stay with us. So, maybe just for people that don't know you, which will basically be everyone. Who are you?
Yeah, I'm Brett. I started P7 Pro, and my background's engineering, so undergrad was mechanical and aerospace, and graduate work is material science. So I work a lot on thin metal deposition and metallurgy and thin film metallurgy. I've been a lifetime HK fan. Mm-hmm. I carried my personal P7 M8, which is right here, my factory P7 M8, for over a decade, until I had small children and didn't carry things around my hip as a result very often. Mm-hmm. So I've always admired the P7 platform. It's one of those things you either get it or you don't, like with a lot of the more advanced platforms. Sure. It's like once you get it and really understand the difference manual of arms, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and it's an easy manual of arms, in my opinion,
I started noticing, I've been on the HK Pro forums like forever, basically, and they're well known in the HK community, and so I've been around since the get-go of those. And I started noticing a lot of people on the forums complaining about like they were retiring their P7s, and not because they were breaking or anything else. I mean, frankly, they're built like tanks. It was because, well, I'm worried that if I need to replace a spring or anything else like that, I'll never be able to replace a part of these things. So people started retiring them, and not because of the lack of the efficacy of the platform. It was because they were just afraid of just basic replacement and repair capabilities. And so that's when I started going down the rabbit hole of starting replacing small parts, like springs are the common ones, because that's what does wear out sooner, like trigger return springs, for example, or recoil springs or other things like that. And then I would converse with other HK armorers and find out what were the repair springs that you would find most often need serviced. And so I did a group of those springs, and those actually sold really quickly, and people were thankful and grateful. And I was like, okay, that's nice, that's cool. And then so I would then do all the springs, and I'm like, okay, well now there will just be a replacement set of all the springs that are capable. So if anything ever goes wrong, there's at least like a full armorer kit of springs, and now you can just replace them.
Sure.
Yeah, and then it snowballed from there.
And then down the rabbit hole you go.
Down the rabbit hole you go, because it's like, well, if I'm making all the springs, I've already got all these dimensions and measurements, I might as well start doing small parts. So there are other small parts that do, I'm not saying they're prone to breakage, but you will find breakage events that happens, like the firing pin bushing on the back, which I can showcase, or the piston. It is a gas retarded system, and the piston is a very, very tight tolerance item. And over time, especially if you shoot relatively corrosive ammo or you over clean the weapon, you can actually wear down the piston.
Well, now I got a new thing to be terrified of. Over cleaning a weapon. I did not know this was a thing.
Let's be real here. Jake never actually cleans any of his guns anyhow. Ask anyone. It's for two reasons. One, he doesn't know how, and two, he's a lazy fuck.
It's shit. It is a thing, because it is a metal piston, and it's a nice case-hardened stainless steel. However, I recommend on the piston you definitely only use like a nylon brush. Some people get really habitual about their cleaning and go in there with like a really stiff copper brush. And yes, copper is much, much, much less hard than stainless steel. But you do that enough times, and you will wear it down. Sure. It's just the way it is.
Okay, fair enough. And so when we first started talking, I think one of the things where I was like, there's a couple of people suggested, they're like, hey, Jake, you're kind of into HK stuff and P7s. They're like, check out this P7 Pro thing. So when we jumped on a call, I remember one of the first things you told me where I was like, well, that's kind of cool. It sounds like he's doing his due diligence, is like even now doing like full production of like basically full American-made P7s is even sourcing the right steel.
Correct. So HK's had a long relationship with Abe Duval, which is well known in the oil and gas industry. That they're a French company that make very, very high-end steels that for very adverse environments. Obviously, I think a firearm barrel qualifies as an adverse environment for a steel.
That's fair.
And so I went through the due diligence, found the alloy that HK used to use, and then I went through the process of importing it from France, having my own custom cold hammer forged tooling made to make polygonal rifling, because I didn't want to just import it and then just have that. There's lots of mandrels out there, but it's just going to make traditional rifling. Well, the P7, like one of the big things it's known for is polygonal rifling, as is HK. And so I had custom mandrels made to do that. And then there's a shop, Rim Country Manufacturing, that makes my barrels, that does factory HK flute specs for the chambers. And so
cool, very cool.
So they'd actually do the factory spec fluting on the chambers. And then I go through the full heat treatment cycle. The one thing, so I do cheat a little bit with modern metallurgy, is so HK never did a cryogenic process in the original P7 barrels. So I do the full heat treatment. But then at the end, when I do a quench step, I do a cryogenic quench, which helps with some of the crystalline structure.
Sure, yeah.
And then bring it up to the tempering temperature, and then do a low temperature plasma nitride on the barrel so it can last a lifetime.
Totally. And if I was advising someone on how to do all of that, that's exactly what I would.
Of course.
That's the path that I would lead someone down based on my metallurgy background. That's exactly where we would go with it. So that said, we'll kind of get to some of the fun stuff on variants and like some of the different options you guys have. Guys, another thank you to the other sponsor of our channel and the video today. That'd be Big Tex Ordnance. So they carry all kinds of wonderful things. Optics. I think I might have gotten my RMR CC there. I can't remember for sure, but I think I did. Lights, gear, accessories for your ARs, all kinds of fun stuff. Great things. They make some of their stuff in-house. They have an offshoot called Kratos Design Group. Actually, some really thoughtful accessories, from hand stops, barricade stops, sling attaches, all kinds of different things. So you guys check out their website. Fast shipping. It'll ship same day if you place the order between or before 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Sorry, I'm distracted, everyone. There's an airsoft war that's happening about 50 yards from us right now. That's always a good time, huh? And so the code is 1911 SYN, 1911 SYN, and that'll save you guys 10% off the store. Really appreciate their support. Great company, great folks over there, patriotic, good American folks. Check out their business. Then lastly, we've got our Patreon linked below if you guys want some behind the scenes content, special merch, swag, access to private classes, early announcements, and access to whiskey drops. We've done watches, knives, all kinds of stuff, and the Patreon boys always get first dibs on that. So scope it out. Real estate website's linked below if you guys need any help on that front. Appreciate the support. On with the show. Okay, and we're back. So let's get into it. Let's get into some fun stuff here. We have some factory HKs on the table. We just kind of threw a hodgepodge of different things here. So we've got some factory HK guns. We've got a couple guns from you. We've got a new frame that's, I think you guys would probably be pretty fascinated by that. A couple slides. So why don't we do this? Since people are, the basis is, hey, they're seeing my gun. Maybe we'll kind of say what it is that we've got here, because this is kind of a hybrid.
It is. It's a hybrid build. So what you're looking at is actually a German factory frame. What's known or little known is that, HK did the runs of the last 500 twice in a row whenever they were running out of components for the P7. So they did the last 500, and then a little while later they did another last 500, and basically meant they had enough components left over.
Got it.
So what happened is the slides are actually extremely complicated to make, and I will go into that. They're actually 3 pieces that are micro-tigged together. They're extremely complex pieces, but they had a lot of frames left over, and so after the production was canned in 2008, there was an FFL that actually imported all those frames from Germany into the US, and then just basically sat on that inventory because they're not exactly the simplest firearms to finish, and they weren't in super easy to finish states, frankly.
So basically, I've got basically a factory HK lower on mine.
HK
I guess to say this to clarify which part of the reason we're talking about that, because you still have factory HK lowers.
That is correct.
Yeah, which is, I think, pretty cool. And I think for some people there might even be an appeal of it's kind of a cool concept to take a factory HK bottom half and kind of do a cool guy new style upper half, kind of a cool concept.
Yeah,
which is essentially what mine is.
No, exactly. So from there, this is obviously the new non-factory slide. This is my slide.
Yeah.
Where we have the front cocking serrations. Also, one of the fine details here, you have an optics plate which hides that a little bit. But what you'll see here is I have a slide that's optics cut here, and you'll see the fact that I actually went in there, and this is admittedly a small nuanced detail, but on the factory P7, you'll notice that if your hands get sweaty, or if you really grab that in any sort of like hurry, you can slip off the slide. The cuts here just really aren't that deep. There's no way around it. And so with these, I basically deepen the cuts towards the rear and then also angle them in.
Fascinating. I actually noticed that.
On the optics plate, it kind of hides it, frankly.
Yeah.
But when you have like a factory iron sight, what's nice is when you're coming over the top to rack it or slingshot it back, as they say, you actually have a little bit more meat to grab onto in the slide. Because otherwise, when your hands are sweaty, like you can slip off the slide.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Cool. Nice.
And then on the front, they are angled in as well. So for those that like to do press checks or do the front rack method, there's plenty to grab onto there without being obtrusive or snag clothing, etc.
Yeah, and there are some, as I was looking at a factory HK slide compared to this a moment ago, because I had both in the same place at the same time to look, you go, okay, there are different lines and things at play. It's not just different serrations. It's like, yeah, there are some like different cuts and things that are kind of cool. It's not just a straight up copy of a HK slide.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the slides because, as I said, they're the most difficult piece, really challenging to manufacture. And I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. If I was going to update the platform, I wanted to make it look like it belonged on the pistol. But if HK was going to make it today, what would it look like? And this is sort of what the iteration landed at.
Yeah. And then so doing red dots is an option. Obvious statement, there's a red dot on mine, but it's like, in terms of like what red dots can people do?
So I have, the shop I use that does my red dot mounts for me. So first off, there's a lot going on back here in the slide. There's just a whole lot of cuts and everything else in there. So it's not like with a USP slide or a Glock slide where it's just basically a chunk of metal and you can just remove. You can't just go in there and remove a lot of material and expect good things to happen. So there's specialty cuts that have to be made. And so we actually mount the sight to the slide on a one-off basis. We don't have adapter plates like this. The slide is made for the optic, period. And so that being said, you can throw as large an optic as you want on there within reason. Like there are customers that have chosen to use the Trijicon SRO. Really cool optic. It's very wide for a P7 slide. The P7 slide is great for carry because of how narrow it is. It's under an inch wide. It's a very small slide. But if you don't mind if it hangs over the edge, / has a little like plate there to mount it on, then okay, you can throw in an SRO. I typically recommend my off the cuff, just immediate, if people said if you have to choose one sight to put on there, I say the RMSC footprint has the most compact footprint. And so the reason that is because it gives you room to, you have to be clear of the extractor slot, because unlike a Glock or USP where the extractor is completely over on this side, so you're clean and clear, this extractor does come up and back. So you have to have an optic that's small enough to mount behind the extractor. And then this gives you a little bit of meat on the rear of the slide for the RMSC footprint to hold the slide into place so there's no shear force on the screws. The RMRCC, while also being narrow, is a little bit longer. And as you'll notice here, what you see is it has to go all the way back. And so there's a plate there to sort of mate with the difference. So there's no additional meat on the rear of the slide holding that down.
Well, and this might be a good time. We were going to talk about this later, but we may as well just get into it now. So let's talk about, so this is the first one that you'd done for an RMRCC.
This is the first model period ever made for an RMRCC.
So I'm the guinea pig for a P7 with an RMR CC. Anytime you're the guinea pig, comes with a certain amount of inherent risk. And this is really kind of the one hiccup that we've had where it's like, it's really not a gun functioning issue, but it's like basically the plate. We'll just kind of describe like what we went through on that.
Yeah, so what happened is as I mentioned, since there's no steel in the back, so this right here, there's a lip back here, so a lot of the shear forces when you go through recoil just absorbs all of it, and this is a giant hunk of 17-4 stainless steel, very strong steel. Well, with this, since you don't have that there, basically, thanks to your guinea pig and good attitude and all that mixed together, what happened is we started to have a loosening issue on one of these. And so now we've redesigned this plate. So for other customers that have ordered the RMR CC moving forward, like I said, each one is custom cut. We're actually adding several recoil lugs into the locking plate. So there's actually a lot of surface area from the slide that comes up, and the plate is press fit down into place. So there's a lot more surface area to hold those G forces in place while it's sliding back.
Because I mean, you're from what you've told me, like P7s put quite a bit of abuse on an optic.
They do. So the way the system works is, as you've already talked about, it's a gas retarded system. So if you actually don't activate the delay mechanism until the cartridge has been discharged. So you ignite the cartridge, the bullet goes over a port, and that port then fills up the gas cylinder sleeve and then the piston, and that's what holds everything locked down. Well, for those first few microseconds, this slide is actually moving backwards very quickly, and then the brakes get pressed on it really hard.
Got it.
So there's a really high amount of G forces that the optics experience specifically on this, versus like with a Browning lockup mechanism, right? You have a significantly higher mass, and then as you move backwards, the mass goes down because the barrel gets locked up, and then the slide goes backwards. The G force profile on this is actually like really hard acceleration and then really hard braking forces very quickly.
Well, and essentially what it was doing is it was basically like the optic was basically beating itself off of the gun. Boy, that just sounds, it's just, the optic was, it was basically just kind of beating itself to death. And so basically what it wound up doing is basically wound up killing. So my screws on my RMR weren't locked down, and then the optics coming a little loose, the plate's coming a little loose, and basically we sacrificed an RMR CC. So basically this is a new RMR CC because I killed one. Which is, hey, at the end of the day, hey, you don't know until you know, and it's like, hey, someone's got to go first. I went first. I sacrificed an RMR CC so that you guys don't have to, is kind of the message. But I do think it's fair, given some of the sort of recent, hiccups and HK recreation products and things that have come out where it's just like, hey, it ain't gone good. And we even talked about this in advance, and I'm like, hey, I think it's important that we say stuff like that so people go, okay, cool. Like, they're being straight with us on like, any issues that they've had, because it's like, cool, that's a correctable issue. Let's just let people know what the solution has been, so that people are like, okay, cool. Like, they shot. Okay, guys, we're doing a quick secondary section in the video here that's being filmed later, because there's just a couple of things that I want to address, and we'll still show you the rest of the P7 video. And in some ways, my opinion is still the same ultimately in the video, which is I think it's a really cool project, and I think it has a lot of potential, and I do hope that it goes somewhere good. But I'd be a little bit of a hypocrite if I didn't bring you this, because I often say I'm not worried about one-off malfunctions. I'm worried about patterns of malfunctions, because I think that that's where stories start to show up. Real quick story. So my P7 came. We'll talk about, I don't know where this is going to fall in the video. We'll talk about the optics plate and kind of the little bit of a, disaster that the optic plate was for the RMR CC. But when my gun first came out of the box, I took it to the range and it didn't work. I was pulling the trigger and it wasn't even impacting the primer. So I was like, okay, something's off here. I called Brett and I was just like, hey, here's what's going on. Took the gun back, overnighted it, fixed it, came back. He said it was a factory German part that, something went down. He replaced it. Gun came back. It's worked fine ever since then, minus the issue with the optic plate. So I kind of chalked it off as a one-off. I was like, hey, I'm not really going to sweat that. Shit happens. Long story short, a buddy of mine buys a gun because I was like, hey, I think it's probably a pretty cool project. You should get one. His gun comes to him and takes it to the range first day. Gun doesn't work and doesn't get a round off. Gun goes back to Brett. Gun comes back. Gun still doesn't work. Goes back a third time, and he's now gotten off 2 rounds, and the trigger is basically pinned to the rear of the receiver, and the gun's done. So he's basically just getting a refund at the gun at this point. So I feel the need to bring you this because, much in the way that, you would be pissed if I were to tell you that Tommy built MP7 was great, and everyone started buying it, and they're like, hey, this thing sucks. Why did you BS me? I just feel the need to bring you that. Now, it could be, hey, these are 2 sort of flukes that popped up, but the point is, hey, there is a pattern there of guns showing up and they don't seem to really be running out of the box. Mine does run fine now, but it's just like, hey, it does feel necessary to bring you guys that, given that some of you may spend thousands of dollars based on whatever that you wound up seeing in the video. So don't take this as like, hey, you should run, you should stay away from this. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it's like there can be a pattern in gun tuber world where it's just like, everyone's afraid to just say the shit that needs to be said. And I never want to be that guy. And I just felt the need to bring you that. You do what you want. It's your dollars. I don't really care at the end of the day. But just know, hey, there is a pattern there. We'll show you the rest of the video, but let that be what it is. Maybe just a quick mention of suppressor. So I think we say somewhere else in the video, basically B&T threaded barrel, B&T can, once the supply of these is dried up, then hey, it's like these are probably done. You will still be able to get a threaded barrel and suppress them. It just won't be the OEM B&T option.
That's correct. So I do make barrels, and as we already discussed about the barrels that came in, so I make factory, extended lengths, and then two different types of threads, half by 28, because all us Americans use half by 28. And then there's also the metric size, which is 13.5 by 1 millimeter left hand.
Yeah.
Because that's the more common one for like USP and other HK style mounting mechanisms.
Yeah.
This one is 13.5 by 1 millimeter right hand, and it also has a long collar on it to specifically mount to this suppressor setup. So this is the factory SD spec, factory SD setup, but you can get in other aftermarket barrels or my factory barrels, basically, that allows you to
and at that point, you could throw on like just earlier, just like, hey, this is a dead air Odessa, and we were going, well, this would be a really good can for that gun, because there's really not an option for suppressor height sights. That's not really a thing that exists yet. So you're going to have, if you're going to suppress one, a skinny suppressor like an Odessa, especially the ability to lengthen it or shorten it, you go like, look, that'd be a pretty slick little combo right there.
Oh, absolutely. Because then you would just be sitting with normal factory sights, which are difficult enough to get a hold of as it is anyways. Yeah. I do make some reproduction ones. It's still like, there are no suppressor height sights, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. So, mine is an example. Like there's a bunch of different options that you guys can do. It's like, hey, mine is exactly what I wanted it to be. I didn't want a rail. It's like I kind of wanted like a traditional P7, to be honest, but with a dot and a can. So talk a little bit about that guy.
Yeah, so this was my first foray into making the frames. I'd previously done full German kit builds where the German parts were over here, and then I would throw in like a part or two of American parts to finish up the builds. This is a titanium build. So this frame is made out of grade 5 titanium. It's billet CNC machined by my machine shop in Converse, PDS CNC Machining, and they did that. I then did any sort of slight fitting that was required and make sure everything was polished and looked nice. They're then diffusion hardened, and then they are hard anodized. So the frames are built to, like, you're not going to get any wear marks. Like, I could take this down right now, which I'm not going to on video, but they will you'll see that there's no wear marks, etc. So they're made to withstand rubbing up against a hardened steel slide and not wearing, etc.
And so on your frame, so obviously on that we've got a pick rail, which is pretty fascinating to think about running a light on a P7. We've talked about this earlier because I'm like, man, I love the lines of the factory HK square trigger guard, but you were highlighting not really an option if you want to run a light. Yeah,
that was the one issue when I started going into design choices, especially, and I'll get into this frame as well, as I start moving forward in the P7 series, there's just not, if I go with the factory profile here, which you'll see here, if you'll see, like, if I were to throw a pick rail here at the end, like, there's, like, what are you going to mount? There's no place to mount anything.
Yeah.
So,
which is fine. That's fair. These are hey, you take a gun from the 70s and you try to modernize it. It's like, hey, you're gonna have to change some stuff. Like
there's a few changes that just have to be made.
That is the reality. So talk about this, because I think that this is a pretty fascinating. This is kind of a cool sneak peek at basically what's being worked on now.
Yeah. So. It's been known, and the people that are following my work, that, like, I'm slowly rebuilding the P7s. I did a limited run of these titanium ones because there just aren't that many parts that are compatible with this left, and I haven't reproduced all these original Euro parts because the dimensions are different on these. So I did like a run of 14 of those were commercially released. One was mine, the T&E model that we showcase in some of the shooting. I've done quite a few German builds before that of all German parts. Then we have the hybrid builds, so OEM frames, some OEM German parts in there, but then a mixture of American parts in there. And then now I'm moving, the first all-American version will be the P7 M13. But my M13s are kind of a twist on what the M13 is. For anybody who's shot an M13, and here I'll pull one up. Here, this is my mine that I got refinished in hard chrome. So it's no secret that they're pretty chunky.
It's a chunky grip.
It's pretty big. It's not, so everybody, I won't say everyone, most people who shoot the P7 series prefer the M8, or if they like the heel mag release, prefer just the Euro style P7 because it's slimmer, it grips easier, and the ergonomics are a little bit better because this requires a little bit of purchase on it, and it just doesn't feel, and under recoil, some of these edges over here, depending on where your knuckles line up, it can feel a little wonky. It's not like P7s are soft shooting, it's just These just ergonomically feel better. There's no way around it. The M8 feels better when you shoot it. So taking that to mind, and with the fact that everyone wants high capacity magazines, is so when I reintroduced the M13, so right now my prototypes are called the M13 Slim Frame. I haven't actually finalized the model name, but it may just come out as the M13 Slim Frame. I don't know. But so you'll see I've got the pick rail. I've got a shortened sort of squared off trigger guard here. A little bit of undercut so you can do that. Very, very similar to 2011 trigger guard areas where you can come up a little bit further underneath it with a support hand. But the big difference here is, this may be hard to show on the video, but you'll see that this is significantly narrower, and actually, now the frame itself is wider than the P7 M8 frame. Excuse me, I'll actually grab the P7 M8 here. But if you include the grips in the measurement, which you would because you're not going to be shooting it without grips, the actual entire gun is narrower. This is actually narrower than the P7 M8, by just a little bit, admittedly. But the actual M13 Slim Frame has a narrower width than the P7 M8. And so the idea would be is now that I'm moving into a full, like a full American supply chain and full American part supply, et cetera, the idea would be is now make that with these slides, and now you can actually have a normal duty size carryable pistol that actually has a high capacity magazine that doesn't have, you know, the chunky grip to it.
And that's very attractive. That I think is a pretty, that's a pretty attractive value proposition, if you will. Something that basically feels like an M8 in my hand, but it's an M13, because I mean, even the M13 mags are chunky, right?
The M13 mags have some width.
And obviously they're expensive. That'll be a whole nother, you know, thing to solve in time, is hopefully a magazine solution. But that starts to be pretty interesting. I mean, that really is a modernized P7. Like that is very much P7 sort of reimagined in the 21st century. Very cool stuff. Is there anything else here that we didn't show? I'm just kind of looking around here.
I didn't like specifically mention the Novak sights, but I don't think they're necessary. I think those just show sort of what it is. I've got an optics cut and I've got this. I could maybe go into the fact that like I'm moving away. I will say like once I go into the M13s, I'm no longer going to be using the factory HK dovetails because the sights are too darn hard to get and it's too expensive to respool them. So I'm moving over to Novak dovetails, and that way it gives it. So these are actually Colt 380 Colt Mustang. These are Colt Mustang dovetails with the Novak cut because they're the only ones that were narrow enough to fit the geometry of the M8 slide that made any sense.
Yeah.
That actually looked right.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, with that,
I should mention that's aluminum maybe too.
And that's what it ultimately will be, is aluminum?
Yeah, so normally when you get stuff made out of aluminum, like a lot of your high-end firearm parts are made out of what's called 70-75 aluminum. Yeah. It's a lot stronger than 60-61, which is your normal commodity aircraft aluminum. This is actually special mill runs of what's called 70-68 from Kaiser aluminum. 70-68 is actually 30% stronger than 70-75, and it actually has every bit the same amount of strength as most steel alloys do. So it literally has the same strength while being significantly lighter weight. I mean, this honestly feels, whenever you say like stuff feels like a toy,
like polymer. Yeah,
this feels like a polymer gun frame.
Yeah,
it feels extremely lightweight. And while aluminum heats up faster, there is that. It also cools down much, much faster. And also, this entire gas block geometry has been re-engineered and redesigned. There's some plugs in there right now for spacer purposes, so ignore the plugs. But this whole area has been redesigned to minimize heat transfer to the trigger guard, so that whole area can take much more mag dumps before you start ending up with an uncomfortable dust cover situation.
So despite it being something that to me would seem like it'd be hotter faster, it will actually mitigate heat better.
Correct.
Okay. I'm down for that.
I will still offer steel and titanium options too.
Sure. Well, hell yeah. Okay, with that said, let's take you guys back over to the range. Okay, next thing that I kind of want to highlight. So I have since my first day shooting the suppressed, I've been operating on a theory of, I think this is more quiet than a normal 9mm suppressed gun. That's my theory, okay? Working theory. And so I want to shoot this same ammo head to head to address the suppressor for those of you, because we would kind of consider this P7 SD, right?
Yeah, for sure.
P7 M8 SD, I guess, if we're going to be correct about it. P7 Pro M8 SD, I don't know. You know, you figure it out. You guys know what we're talking about. But the can is from B&T. So really, if you're going to run a can on a P7, this would be the most appropriate way to do it. Would you tend to agree?
It's factory spec. That was what was designed around the original P7 SDs.
Yes. Now, there are some of these floating out on the wild. This was an exclusive thing. You guys can go type it in on Google, and no doubt you can find it. Probably once these dry up, and I imagine they will begin to dry up pretty quickly, you'll have a very hard time finding these. So just, I'm not telling you what to do. Not telling you what to do. Just saying, I'd maybe kick it around. So we're going to shoot basically the 124, just Blazer 124, and then we're going to shoot my little Stealth Arms Platypus here with a can, a Dead Arrow Dessa 9, about the same length as a P7 can. I'm just curious if there's any audible difference in noise, because I think this is going to be more quiet.
Okay.
And I can't tell you why that I think it is, but that's what I think. All right, here we go. And I'm not wearing ears for reference, because the gun's very quiet. Oh, it's not even close. Oh, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm gonna be a true asshole here. So, not even close. Okay, guys, I'm just gonna go 1 and 1, okay? Keep in mind, same ammo. Listen to the difference here. It's not even close. That is crazy. Okay, so speculate. Why?
We are running 124 grain Blazer brass supersonic ammunition.
Yeah.
The P7 does have fluted chambers, so it does bleed off some of the gas from the chamber. So it might kill a little bit of the muzzle velocity, so it don't get quite as severe of a crack after it exits the suppressor, because you would get a supersonic crack normally. Yeah. And I really didn't hear a really distinct crack.
No, I never have.
Normally do. Yeah. So I think it's killing a little bit of the muzzle velocity.
Interesting, because I mean, genuinely, it's not close.
No, that was not, like, qualitatively a huge difference.
It's the difference in shooting subs and supers is what it just sounded like. Yeah. It sounded like subs.
It did.
And this sounded like supers. Like, I know I could throw 147s in this and it'd balance out a little bit, but it's like apples to apples. Damn, that's an incredibly good sounding gun. So again, if you're in the line of work of government assassin or anything in that ballpark, like,
it's a good tool for the job.
Get the job done. Get the job done. So another thing we should mention, and forgive us guys, there's an airsoft war happening behind us. If some of you in the airsoft war live in Utah, fuck yeah, bro. So the other thing with the SD is you're going to need to clean this quite a bit. You need to understand the maintenance cycle.
Absolutely. So, the P7 in general, because as you've already mentioned, has the piston gas delay system.
Yeah.
So you're already bleeding off muzzle gas, like from the actual initial initiation of the cartridge under the chamber.
Yep.
So you have to keep that chamber clean no matter what. It's also fluted. And these original spec suppressors have K-baffles in them. They're not flow-through suppressors at all. So you're going to have quite a bit of back pressure to it.
Yes.
That mixed with the fluted chamber means these things do get dirty.
Yeah.
And with a P7, you already need to maintain it. I would say you need to go through a thorough cleaning every 400 or 500 rounds with a regular P7. If you run an SD and run it suppressed regularly, you're probably need to be looking at cleaning it pretty thoroughly every 150 to 200 rounds would be my suggestion.
And right now, today, we're at about 150 rounds.
Right.
So as a frame of reference, and she's running fine, like no hiccup. And truthfully, I'm not even sensing a lag like there's about to be one. I know obviously there is a failure point. You will hit a point where it's like you tap out, but it's like, just know definitely, hey, if you're if you're a Glock guy and you're like, oh, I never have to clean it ever, like, cool, this, let's understand what we're getting into. It's kind of like 2011s. They're great. They're perfectly reliable, but you have to understand the maintenance cycle that's required to keep them running. The other thing with a P7 is heat. So after we've been all day about 4 mags.
Yep.
About 4 mags, and you're probably going to be letting her cool down.
Yep.
So right now we're at 3 mags. I'll dump the 4th. So, and you can start to feel it build up pretty quick, right? And that's basically because the piston's right, I just felt it right there. It's basically the piston's right underneath the, kind of within the frame, in essence.
Correct.
Right where your hand's going. But they have these little heat shields that don't do a whole hell of a lot, but they,
well, it's weird. You wouldn't be placing your finger there necessarily anyways, but yes.
Yeah. But it's like, hey, after 4 mags right now, you go, cool, I'm good. Like, let's let her cool off for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's a little tour on how these bad boys work. Okay, everyone. So one of the things that we've talked about with the P7 is how crisp the trigger is. Amazingly, you think the P7 trigger can actually be better, which is kind of shocking to me.
Yeah, no, I think for a duty trigger, especially considering when it was designed, it's phenomenal. But you'll notice when you hit the wall, which is when the sear bar touches the cocking pawl and the firing pin, once you hit the wall, you do have to drag it down a little bit. Now, is it a good combat / duty trigger? Yeah, it's amazing. But I think by optimizing that interface, you can get a little better.
And I would have said the same thing. Really, at the end of the day, I would have had the exact same take on that. You know, just based on my engineering background, I would have said that. So I'm just kind of curious. And the other variable is, usually once you throw a suppressor into the mix, like your POI shift can be a little all over the place, especially on pistols, because they just do kind of on thread, you know, bit by bit. So I'm just curious, we're back at how far you think that steel is? I'm saying
50?
No, that's shit, son. That's like, I'm going to say it's closer to 75.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So just out of curiosity, just kind of curious, hey, suppressed P7, can we ping steel at these sort of distances? Not that this gun was at all designed to do this, but. So it turns out it's not really that hard. So fixed barrel, money trigger, and with the fixed barrel, adding the suppressor in, incredibly easy to be accurate with at distance. And this is designed to be shot at like 7 yards. Okay, everyone. So sort of bring you some final thoughts and send this thing home. So a question that I think of posed to you is, you know, I mean, these aren't cheap. They are, I would say, relatively a little bit less expensive than factory HK guns. So there's, I mean, you know, M13s are basically $4,000 now. You know, if you're getting an M13, M8, I don't track as much because I've won an M13 mostly. But you know, you go, okay, your guns aren't cheap, and you guys can go to the site and play around and just kind of see roughly where they're priced at. But I guess the question would become, and I know the answer, but I just kind of, you know, you have it out as, hey, for a similar-ish price point, why would someone potentially get this over a factory HK gun?
So I would start off with, if you go with one of our basic builds, like just the factory German frames and one of our basic builds, they're priced at $2,400 to begin with. And that comes with case, the cleaning tools, test target manual, and a couple mags and a lifetime warranty. So that's the thing. So like if something happens to it, or like, oh man, I went to the range and like something wonky happened, it's like, oh, it's going to get serviced and repaired.
Yeah.
Period. Number one. Number two is, if you adjust for inflation on the price point, I get this question a lot. It's like, man, these are really expensive. Number one, like, it's really expensive to make these. Whenever HK used to make them, they advertised them as
the reputation.
They were the most expensive production firearm in the world. Yeah. And if you go from the original price point and you adjust for inflation, $2,400 is actually a little cheaper. It's like, it roughly works out to like $2,800 to $3,000, depending on which year you choose the price point, et cetera. So they were always expensive guns to make, and it turns out
there's a reason.
They still are. It's because they're complicated. There's a lot of CNC machining that goes into these, and there's just a price point that comes along with that. And it's just, the costs are what the costs are. I'm not sitting over on some lopsided profit margin. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It's an expensive gun to make.
Well, and like you said, I think part of it, I was talking to a buddy about it the other night, and I was just saying, hey, look, I think part of it, one, obviously, look, to be candid with you, I don't think I would have the guts to buy a factory HK and be like, yeah, let's chop it up for dots and start cutting up the slide and everything. I'm like, I don't think I got the guts to do it, man. But if we're saying, okay, brand new out of the box, whether it's a hybrid or a new slim frame build or whatever it is, you go, I'm willing to get a little bit crazy on one of those. Like, yeah, let's send it, man. Like, let's suppress this thing. Let's throw a dot on it. Like, let's do some wild shit. For me, it's like, hey, in many ways, your project, for me on a personal level, is not a replacement for me wanting a P7. It's actually not. To me, it's in addition to. It's like, I still want a factory HK. Like, I will, damn you, get a factory HK P7 in this studio. But it's like, I think that this is also very cool. To me, this checks a different box. This is like a modernization and just like cool guy shit.
And see, hearing you say that is honestly the entire point. Like I said, when I took this on, it was me getting discouraged from people taking really, in my opinion, like a superior carry platform. I know I can get argued with all day long that, but I think it's a really fantastic carry platform. It's inherently safe. It's inherently fast and accurate to fire.
Yeah.
And the thing is like people just were stopped shooting them. And that's the guaranteed. And to me, that was like where the graveyard was starting to get built around the entire P7 design. And that's what I wanted to stop. It's because it's a great design. It deserves to continue on. It probably needs to be modernized so it becomes more popular in a modern light, sure. But to your point, for people who want a factory P7, knock yourself out. Go out and get a factory P7. There's absolutely nothing wrong. They're fantastic pistols. I own too many of them. They're awesome. But that's just it. A lot of people are uncomfortable with customizing them or just taking them out and just shooting them a lot. And they were designed to be shot a lot. And that's just it. You can take it out guilt-free, have a really cool platform, and now you can shoot it and not worry about where spare parts coming from or what am I going to do with it if something happens.
And to me, that was one of the sort of tipping points in me starting to kind of get behind it, is just going, okay, you go buy a P7 from 1982 or whatever, and you're like, man, I mean, this thing's got like 40-year-old parts in it. Maybe some stuff was replaced. Like, I don't really know what I'm getting into here. This is kind of cool knowing, okay, look, I got a brand new gun, and if something goes wrong, I'm just gonna call you and be like, Brett, you know, hey, my optic plate's coming off. I'm sending it to you. You figure it out. You know, it's like, can't do that with HK anymore. They don't service the P7. So it's like, I think that there is a really cool, unique place for it. And like I said, it's like, I've kind of been looking at it not so much as a clone, but in many ways kind of a reimagining of, there are clones of HK guns, don't get me wrong, where they're like, yeah, we're going to clone a G3 or a UMP or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. We're definitely playing in clone territory here, but playing semantics a little bit to me, but it's like, yeah, I think kind of almost like a modernization and reimagining of a really cool legacy gun. And I mean, I'll just tell you straight up, when I got this and I threw the can on and everything, I was like, that is one of the more aesthetically pleasing guns I've seen in a hot minute. And if that thing is not in a video game or movie pronto, I'm going to be pretty let down in our pop culture scene, because I'm like, yeah, somewhere in a video game, this needs to exist, because this is just cool. Like, yeah, it's dirty, suppressed, all that kind of shit, but I'm like, that is cool. Like, it's really, really cool gun. So yeah, I mean, I guess all that to say, I mean, it probably sounds like I'm kissing Brett's ass here, but it's like, you know, we've been talking about this for like a year, so it's like, hey, I've kind of been, you know, in a small way along for the ride a little bit. I think anytime someone wants to roll the dice and say, hey, look, I'm gonna take a stab at doing something that's cool and different, no one's really done it, it's like, I'm here for it. I'm rooting for it. I think it's a really cool project. Like, I'm really excited to see how the slim frame pans out. Like, I think that's a really cool thing that could pique a lot of people's interest. Obviously, it's still in development, but it's like, I know it's something you're pressing pretty hard forward on. So this is cool. Like, you know, it's like I'm a fan on the sideline going like, yeah, I'm excited to see how this whole thing pans out.
No, well, thanks for the kind words. And yeah, it's been a labor of love. But like I said, I think it's worth it, because the design itself is valid, and I think it deserves to live on. So I thought, yeah, it's going to keep on modernizing and keep on keeping on.
Yeah, super cool. So you guys go, you know, look up P7 Pro. You'll figure it out. You'll find them online and all that good stuff. And yeah, man, thanks for coming out. This is cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.